Welcome to the Enterprise Sessions. Today I'm speaking with Dr Joanna Burch-Brown, who is Senior Lecturer in Philosophy, Co-Chair of the Bristol Histories Commission and Co-Director of Bridging Histories. Joanna, I'm really pleased you made time to talk to me this afternoon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I'm really looking forward to talking about Bridging Histories, what you've done already and what you plan to do in this current phase of development. But perhaps we could start with a little bit of background. Would you like to tell us a bit about where you were before you came to the university and what brought you to Bristol?
Yeah, so I grew up in Virginia in the Appalachian Mountains, and I was an only child. I spent my childhood running around in the woods. It was just hundreds of miles of woods around. And I always knew how to find my way back to my house by finding the railway track and following it back. I then had the good fortune of being introduced to an amazing organization called Alternate Routes. When I was about 12, my mom and her partner were part of this organization. And we would spend the summers, there was a week-long camp every summer where there were artists from all across the Southwest who all used arts and communities for social change, who'd come together, and sometimes people described it as Disneyland for social justice workers. And that was extremely formative for me.
So let's talk a little bit about Bridging Histories, shall we? So would you like to talk about the genesis of that whole undertaking? What sort of spurred you on?
In 2015, I got involved with the Countering Colston campaign in Bristol. So that was right at the start of the Countering Colston campaign. There had been decades of people boycotting the Colston Hall, of people sort of trying to shed light on the fact that Bristol hadn't acknowledged the history and impact of its involvement with transatlantic enslavement. But at that moment, things seemed really stuck on that topic. And as an academic in philosophy, I was really thinking, how can I shift into doing a type of academic work where the work I'm doing is really serving the community? And so I spent a long period of time just like going and listening to people about what needed to happen locally. And one of the things that kept coming up and was really obviously stuck, was this issue about the memorialization of Edward Colston. So I thought, well, I can see getting involved in that as a philosopher. There's really interesting ethical questions about how we address difficult histories. There are really interesting ethical questions about intergroup dynamics and how do you support communities with different starting points to come to shift their perspectives and grow together. So then in 2020, when the statue came down in the Black Lives Matter protest following the death of the murder of George Floyd, the mayor of Bristol set up the Bristol History Commission, and he tasked the Bristol History Commission with helping the city to understand where we've been so we can better decide where we want to go. So I initially thought that wasn't the right structure. I thought it was the right question, but not the right structure. So he was inviting a group of academics to address this question. And I thought, well, this is really about, it's something where people feel disenfranchised. They feel like elites are deciding, and it really needs to be much more grassroots. So I spent the first few months on the Bristol History Commission just scratching my head saying, okay, how can we actually achieve this task?
This isn't it, but what is the method? What is the route?
Yeah, that's right. So Bridging Histories was kind of my hypothesis about how we can help a whole community to understand where we've been so we can better decide where we want to go. So we also have Bridging Histories projects in London that have been funded by the London Mayor's Office. And one of the ones there had initial pot of funding, but is now going on. So this is Culture Tree. So Culture Tree have gotten a grant now to do a series of Yoruba heritage trails in Suffolk. So they're going to have, I described those 6 activities. They're creating a heritage trail for each of those activities for Yoruba-speaking communities in Suffolk. So they'll have a I Am From heritage trail. It's about migration stories, a food heritage trail, a street histories heritage trail, like what happened in the Yoruba community on different places in Suffolk, and so on. So that's great.
I would imagine that it must be quite exciting and satisfying for you to see this set of ideas and initiatives that you've initiated with partners like George, I realise, starting to sort of have effects beyond Bristol. It's wonderful for Bristol, but it's great to hear them sort of starting to spread to other cities.
Yeah.
Is that part of your direct aspiration? Like, do you want to be involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to learn in Bristol. We want to test ideas in Bristol. We want to have a really significant impact in Bristol and make a step change in different communities on a kind of reparative way. But we do want to really be building a global franchise.
Great.
You know, the vision would be to have cohorts of ambassadors in different, you know, it could be in a city, it could be in an organization, it could be, you know, any kind of location, but anywhere in the globe, you could have cohorts of ambassadors doing projects that are local, you know, tailored to the local community, that are coming out of a local community, that sort of reflect that local wisdom about what's needed locally, but that have a common umbrella. So there's a kind of connection amongst them. So they get to kind of be part of a bigger sort of cultural change, part of a bigger community.
And the strength in feeling that there are others elsewhere trying to achieve some of the same principles as you, that it will look different locally according to local needs, but that sense of critical mass, I would imagine, must be quite inspiring, or in this vision of yours at least.
In the vision, exactly. And speaking of vision, I guess, like, for me, our vision would be that to have a world where everybody feels celebrated for who they are. Everybody feels rooted in our collective heritage, and everybody feels empowered to be a positive change maker. So it has that present, you know, past, present, and future aspect to it.
As you move from this being a project, an initiative, I don't want to define it, but into something that is more of a commercial enterprise, albeit a social enterprise, presumably there are other skills that you're going to need to either develop in yourself, or more likely find other people who have them and port them in. I'm thinking about, I mean, do you need to raise investment? You will need to sort of have a legal structure for this company. So are you finding mechanisms to get that kind of support that still sit with your values and your ethos of what you're trying to achieve?
We've had great support from the commercialization team at University of Bristol. We're still at the beginning of this journey of becoming commercial, but that team has really helped me to understand, like, how we can move forward. People like Julian Janke, and actually that whole team just have been really fantastic with giving us a perspective on what's involved and what we need to move towards. So I could never have done that on my own. It's totally this kind of input of expertise, complementary expertise. We are really looking for an investor who has that kind of shares our values and that can support the work that we're doing and understands the vision, both the local sort of micro scale vision and also the big vision, and who can help help us understand how to make the journey that we want to make.
I am picturing this network as sort of, you know, just spreading around the globe, and these connections going multi-order, but ultimately there's this shared understanding, shared expertise with all that local nuance. Yeah. It's been really very powerful.
Yeah. And for it to really it's a very beautiful form, you know, it's because it's so welcoming to people of diverse backgrounds. I also want it to be, I would love for it to be politically diverse, to have people from really different ages, really different demographics. So it's not just all one political orientation, and where people get to experience that really unique relationship that can happen when people with different political views, different social backgrounds respect and listen to each other. There's something really sacred, I want to say, about that respectfulness across difference. And I want for people to experience that and to find that actually it can be a lot more comfortable than they thought to make those connections.
And rewarding if you can get past the fear, perhaps.
Yeah.
So thinking back to the Joanna you painted for us right at the beginning, I've got this image of you sort of running in the woods and following the railway track home. What would that Joanna think about what you're doing now? What would she say?
Yeah, I would say she would feel like she'd found the railroad track back.
Wonderful. That's a wonderful analogy. Is there something you would say to her to encourage her, to reassure her, to guide her?
Yeah, just to keep making time for stillness and stepping outside of the frenzy of things to just be really calm, be in a more meditative state, and allow things to emerge from that.
That's all for this Enterprise session. But join us again soon to hear more about the way our amazing staff and students are translating their enterprising ideas into real-world impact. And do please click on the links if you'd like to contact the University of Bristol.